So you've been in so many of these international trade negotiations. What do you make of the reports that they're moving toward these 5 memoranda of understanding? Not be final agreements, but at least memoranda of understanding.
Yeah, this is certainly a hopeful sign that things are beginning to move more towards some concrete deals, although I would caution people. I don't think we should have too much of a sense of euphoria that all of a sudden we're going to get all of these as fleshed out deals. You know, a lot of them are extremely complex because, and you and I have talked about this, they cover a lot of areas of Chinese domestic regulatory and investment policy, and there will need to be some pretty deep dives into the details of those in order to finalize a deal. But it's certainly some movement in the right direction. I'm more skeptical about this talk of deals to buy a certain fixed amount of U.S. agriculture or other products, because I think those are going to be problematic sorts of deals.
Well, Rufus, explain that, because in some ways they're easier. I mean, they either buy $30 billion worth of agricultural projects or they don't. You can enforce that. It's pretty straightforward. But how are they problematic from your point of view?
Well, they're problematic. First of all, it's not clear over what length of time we're talking about. We had over $25 billion of agricultural exports to China before all this started. So over what period of time are we talking about to get back to that? Secondly, does that mean they're not buying as much of other products from the U.S., or that they're entering into some sort of exclusionary managed deal with the U.S. that other countries could challenge and potentially lead to problems for us there? And, really, these notions of a sort of a strictly managed bilateral trade with deals to buy this much of that or this much of the other thing, to me, on a bilateral basis, those are going to lead to a lot of challenges and complexity. I know farmers want to see our exports to China restored. We're going to have a struggle just to get them back to where they were before the trade war began. But I'm skeptical of commitments by the Chinese to buy certain things in the future. In the past, they haven't abided by those commitments.
Rufus, spend a minute on another subject that Bloomberg has reported on, that reportedly, at least, the United States is demanding some stabilization of the exchange rate between the U.S. dollar and the Chinese yuan. Has that been put in other U.S. trade agreements, and is it workable?
I don't normally comment on that because historically, that wasn't really a part of trade agreements, and it's problematic. I mean, obviously, the question of flexible exchange rates and whether countries are putting the hand of government on the exchange rate in order to give themselves a trade advantage has been problematic. There are some actually provisions in the WTO about this, but as you know, historically, trade deals haven't really covered this because we want to see countries not intervening in the market. The other question is whether China's currency really is undervalued at this point. In objective terms, I'm not sure that argument would hold up.
So let's talk about something that very much trade agreements have dealt with. That's tariffs. Let's talk about the EU, the European Union, and automobiles. We had President Trump meet with the Chancellor of Austria yesterday, and as part of that meeting, this is what he said to the press.
We're trying to make a deal. They're very tough to make a deal with the EU. They've been very difficult over a period of time, over many, many years. And so it's something we think about, and we're negotiating with them. If we don't make the deal, we'll do the tariffs.
Now, we have to always remind ourselves, this is under Section 232, as I understand, which is a national security provision. It's hard for some people to understand why importing Mercedes-Benzes is damaging our national security. Put that to one side. What would it do to the economy of Europe, the economy of the United States, if, in fact, these tariffs went forward?
Yeah, I think if the president actually goes forward with these tariffs, it's going to be one of the worst self-inflicted wounds of any trade policy decision. I mean, first of all, the auto industry itself is opposing this. They're saying that it's going to lead to as many as 350,000 jobs lost in the U.S., $2,500 per car price increase, more than 1 million fewer vehicles sold in the U.S. You can't raise these kinds of tariffs without having that impact. But secondly, our auto industry is exporting all over the world. For us to start a trade war on autos, I mean, clearly the Europeans will go nuts about this. It will certainly collapse any negotiation we have with them. And quite justifiably, I mean, the use of a national security justification to do something in an industry which has had cross-border trade, cross-border investment. We're building European brand automobiles in South Carolina and Alabama and selling them to China. It makes no sense to start a trade war with Europe on this, either for us or for them.
Rufus, could it make sense possibly as a means to an end? That is to say, the president has said he wants to eliminate tariffs. What if he was using this threat and also actually reduce tariffs? Would that be a good thing? I
mean, you know, at first blush, that sounds great. But let's face it, and you and I have talked about this before, David, we have 25% tariffs on light trucks. I'm not sure the president wants to put that on the table with the Europeans. But we also have restrictions in certain other areas that the Europeans would like to see eliminated. Do we want them breaking the trade rules to retaliate against us every time we have something we don't like? I mean, this takes the whole notion of respecting our prior agreements and negotiating forward from there and turns it on its head. The thought that the U.S. can just use its massive leverage to force every country in the world to bend to our will is a mistake. In the end, yes, certain kinds of targeted leverage where somebody is doing something really unfair, then we should use that as a last resort. But unfortunately, this president has used it as a first resort, and in doing so has really made it much more difficult for us to keep good terms of trade with these countries.